But it's great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Like, why don't you just kick off, give us a quick introduction to who you are and what you're building?
Sure. So my name's Gauthier. I'm from Belgium originally. Been living in the UK now for about 7 years. And I'm building a company called Perlego. Basically, it came out of a personal pain point of mine, which was really expensive price of textbooks. So when I was going to university, I'd spend like, $200-300 on a book. I'd read 2 chapters of the book and never use it again. And I noticed that all my friends, they would download content illegally, like piracy or buy secondhand books. So yeah, whilst I was at uni, I had a small business which I sold, and I've been doing Perlego ever since. 7 years on, we've raised just over $90 million. We're about 130 in the team. We're active in 191 countries, and we've kind of been branded by the press as the Netflix or Spotify for books. So essentially you pay £12 a month here in the UK and you get access to millions of books.
And it's amazing. Like, I was having a look at the website, and I thought this is an amazing thing right there. Like, and the pain points that you were just talking about, which is the pain point that every student at university has experienced. And then, there's almost like the secondhand marketplace where you'd buy textbooks from people in the year above you, and then you'd sell them on the next year, and they were ludicrously expensive. So one of the questions I wanted to ask is, like, how did you manage to get, I guess, like the critical mass required to make this work, where you have enough books or publications on the site that then people are willing to say, okay, this is my like primary source of the information that I need?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, look, the biggest sort of difficulty in building a company like Perlego is very much of a chicken and the egg, right? You need to lock down the supply to get on the consumers. And in the early days, I'll be candid, I knew nothing about publishing, nothing about edtech and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the publishers said it was ridiculous. However, to my benefit, this industry is very similar to the music industry, like in the early kind of 2008, 2009. If you think about it, publishers lose about 35% due to the secondhand book market, so students selling secondhand books, and then a further 28% due to piracy. So to publishers, the pitch was, look, we'll create a recurring revenue line where we pay you for all the consumption. We mitigate piracy from happening, and we're creating a more digital, sustainable solution. And also for their gross profits, it's much nicer, right? If you think about it, in your print model, there's a lot of wastage in the supply chain, print, distribution, wholesale, returns. So what's interesting, on £100 book, the publishers might receive £23 to £25, and the author might only get £4. So what our big pitch to the publishers is cut out all the middlemen, go direct, go, pure digital. And it's a much more scalable model.
Well, I didn't realize that the margin is so low for them. Did that make it an easy sell, or was there still a lot of like coaching, hand-holding to try and get them to see the vision?
I think it took a bit of time. So like now, fast forward, we've got about 9,600 publishers, over 1.5 million titles. We've got about 4 million on our database. So we've done a really good job on that level. Kind of how I thought about it is, what we've done is we took all the reading lists in the UK, Europe and the US, and we worked on content coverage. So if I needed to do an intro to venture capital course, these are the 4 books I would require, and we negotiate with those publishers. And then we started to sign global full collection deals. But in the beginning, it was working from a small cohort and then building up from there.
Interesting. Did you pick specific universities and specific courses and just go after that group with those texts?
Yeah, so the way we thought about it was, if we think about, and we might have the chance to talk a bit about our international business and how we think about it, but the main focus was on the language level. So English as a language, which gave us the UK and the US. And in those markets in the UK, we have about 2.3 million students. In the US, we have about 19.8 million students. And then, as you know, like in Europe, a lot of students, I studied my undergrad in Italy. All of my courses were in English. So English was the first cohort. And then what we did is we both based it on what are the biggest kind of undergrad subjects. So business, economics and management is much bigger than veterinary science, as an example. So we'd go after those kind of tranches and then work our way from there.
Got it. Very cool. Very cool.
What is, sorry, I have to unmute myself in 2 places. What is sort of your second act here? So do you just go deeper into other languages? Is there, what you're basically working on in a way is also digitizing education to some degree, taking a lot of these physical books out of that system. How do you think about sort of the next move where you want to go with the company?
Yeah. So if we think about our initial vision was aggregating your textbook material or book material in one beautiful space. The second layer of the vision was how could you build an engagement or learning tools around the content layer? So with AI, and we hopefully will get to talk about the implications of AI in Perlego, today we've built things like Workspace, so you can aggregate your slides, your notes, your essays all in one beautiful space. The third layer for us is to have collaboration where you could work with your peers and your classmates on that content layer. So really moving away from the Spotify for textbooks analogy and to a marketplace where you can find all your core learning material, people can upload their own content, and then you have a collaborative and like an education layer around it. It's also important to note in terms of our go-to-market, we have a really big D2C business, but we also have quite a big B2B business. So Paolo, where are you from, if I may ask?
Germany.
I can't. Oh, nice. Okay,
Sorry,
so like
Germany.
in Germany, we
Sorry.
have quite a few. Nice. So we have quite a few like business schools that buy for all their students, etc. So in your first day of class, you get full access to Perlego, and they basically incorporate that as part of the tuition fees. And then what's really cool is now we started to bring a lot of like, you know, best-selling trade titles. So you might get Perlego your first 3 years at university, and then after you'll get access, you know, you might buy it as a consumer after.
Yeah. I would also be like super interested in, because I feel like a lot of self-education that happens on the internet is sort of, you know, you don't really know where that data is coming from. Like, is this actually state of the art for this field, et cetera? So I'd like, I mean, the inventory that you're building up and sort of the potential for summary and like learning on top of it, that sounds so interesting to me in college, but also beyond college, right? When you're not stuck to these physical books, but you can kind of sit on top. Is that something you think about as well?
Yeah, so in October last year, we launched one of our latest products, which we call Research Assistant. Essentially, this uses AI in 2 layers. We've built a semantic search with RAG on top, so you can ask any question in Perlego. So let's say the implications of interest rate in the VC market, and it will generate a beautiful 200 to 300 word answer. But unlike other providers, you have all the sources and the material in there, and then you can go straight to the book. And now a product that's coming out in the next few weeks is Talk to Books, the ability to ask questions and tutor and work with your book, which is really cool to help for your learning. So yeah, now that you have the content layer, you can build all these toolset layers on top, and that's really where we're seeing a lot of engagement and, you know, a lot of growth in the business essentially.
I mean, I think the natural next question is how does that work together with the LLMs in the long run? Obviously, you or your publishers are sitting on a lot of training data as well. Do you know how the publishers think about that, or how do you think about it?
Yeah. So we need to be really careful from that perspective. And you might have seen there's some recent lawsuits from Meta, Anthropic, who essentially scraped pirated books. There are about 460,000 books that were scraped to train the LLM models. Now, Perlego can do any form of trading in a closed environment, which stays on our ecosystem, but we are not allowed to train or sell that data to external providers. Some publishers have done direct deals, but what I noticed is the majority of the publishers are reticent to do so. And right now, the first phase is more lawsuits claiming back, you know, the IP that was infringed. But I'm not allowed to sell or do deals, you know, with other providers. But I've got all this great stuff on my side that I can leverage and use. And essentially, because one thing to note is we pay back royalties to our publishers. We pay a rev share back to them. Right. That's a critical component, is we pay for all consumption, both when you're training in our models, but also when you're consuming the content as a general reader.
Okay, so there's also on your cost side, it's really like based on what people are using and consuming.
Yeah, so the way we pay back, our royalty model is based on consumption and the value of the content. Essentially, you know, an introduction to German history book might be worth less than an introduction to Belgian history book. So my book would be a bit more premium, as an example, and I get a bit more of the payments back, you know?
Thanks for that.
Yeah. I'm joking. I just, you know,
I know.
Seb, I couldn't pick on Seb, so yeah.
No, that's super interesting. So yeah, you've kind of got access to build the models on top of the data sets that you've got, but do it in a compliant and a legal way, which actually it feels like it give you a huge advantage over those sort of like generalist LLMs. Do you see that being the direction that I guess like education goes in? I think one of the first AI things that I ever built was an Ask Aristotle AI bot, and it was a bot just solely trained on Aristotle's works, and that was just because you could generally find them without any sort of, they were out in the world, and it was just for fun. And it was just like, oh, could you create a version of Aristotle just trained on his text, and what would he say if I'm in a moral conundrum? Do you see that kind of being the future of the business and of education in general, where you can have these almost like bots or LLMs to answer really specific questions about academic texts and areas?
Yes and no. So will Perlego, try and compete against the OpenAIs of the world? I don't think so. But where there's a huge opportunity is to do it on a course or subject level. So we could take all the philosophy books, and then you can train and learn off all the, hundreds of thousands of philosophy books we have. That is something that's really exciting and that we're looking into. I'm not sure of the applications yet. So the way I think about it is you have general search, you'll then have search or training on a subject level, and then you'll have in a book level. And because, you read these 3 books, I can recommend those 2 books, etc. For now, we focused on search, study tools, and then we're also going to do what we call talk to books. And that's the 3rd layer. The subject layer is a bit more complex. And the reason for that is, it's a silly thing, but like some people's perception of this philosophy book might be against another one. So how do you balance and how do you think about the hallucinations from that perspective, which adds a bit more complexity and, something we're testing and playing around with.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That was kind of why I wanted to build this agent, because I was like, I don't want hallucinations. I don't want other people's opinions, but maybe I want to find a good quote about what Aristotle thinks the good means or whatever.
And that you will be able to do in Perlego in the next few weeks.
Yeah, that's really cool. I can, as a student, you could really see the use cases if you were looking for specific quotes to back up your argument and you haven't done the full reading recommended by your tutor. What's your take on like AI in general impacting and changing education? Do you think it's going to be something that fundamentally disrupts the way we educate our children? Do you see it as like a tool? What's your kind of overall take?
Yeah. So what is the question? Do I think AI is going to completely disrupt sorry, could you repeat that in a bit more detail? Sorry.
Yeah, I guess we're sort of in this transition phase where students are now using AI across the board, but it feels like the curriculum or the way that we test students hasn't changed despite them having access to these new tools and these new models. Do you think the way that we are educating and assessing children should change?
The short of it is yes. If I think about my own business, which is more higher education and professional, one thing that's really interesting is, I'm not sure if you've got, I noticed you guys started up, and I'm sure you're getting applications to join, and you probably get all these applications and they're all AI written, and it's just like, oh wow, there's no originality to anything anymore. What I do think is AI could probably help in 3 main ways. One, personalization. The way you, Seb, learn is very different to the way I learn, and I think there's a huge opportunities to create more gamification, more adaptive learning, that you could learn faster and me less fast, as an example. So number 1, personalization will be really good. Number 2, when I look at the education space as a whole, one of the biggest bottlenecks or fragments is actually you as a professor, as a student, you're very time poor, right? And so can AI help you drive efficiencies from that perspective with automated grading, or maybe like student progress plans, etc. And then I think the third one for me, like it's a big thing, but like on Perlego today, there's a huge push towards accessibility. So we use premium AI voices where you can listen to all the books on the go. And if we think about the audiobook market as a whole, only 4% of books are made available digitally. But because we have all these books in the background, you can now listen to all those books. So again, I just think, there's so many cool things you can do about make it more accessible with text to speech or, real-time translations, those kind of things. So those are my 3 things that I'm excited about. However, I do want to reiterate, I'm seeing people are learning much less and just using ChatGPT for everything. And that just as a macro trend, I'm a bit more worried about.
Yeah, and there's definitely a growing trend, like an overall pushback against higher education. It feels like there's a lot of people are now advocating to skip university, and I think there's a part of that is how much easier it's becoming with AI tools, and how the assessment criteria hasn't changed.
So did you go to university, if I may ask?
Yeah, I was in Durham, in North England.
Nice. I've heard that's a very nice university.
It's lovely. It's like a very quaint town, very small. It's like the type of university you'd like your child to go to, because it's like known for its being safe and boring. What about you?
So I studied in Bocconi and in Cambridge. But basically, what I'm trying to say is education, at the end of the day, it's about an experience, right? Do I think I got the value of my money from going to Bocconi and spending X amount? No. But it's going to come down to two things in the future. One, the quality of the classes and the experience you have as a student. And, I really think it's been very formative to create great friendships and things like that. And that is something I would place a lot of money on. Do I use my degree in my day-to-day business? Not much. But I think the perception of education probably will change as an experience more than, because you can learn everything online. And candidly, everything I've built at Perlego, be it raising money, etc., you pretty much learn it on the go, right? So I think, we're going to see a huge shift around higher education in the next 10 years. And it's going to be much more like, what is my value for money?
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting.
And that way it's great, because you can bleed into the, further adult life, because it's not about just using the textbooks while you use them, then selling them to the next person, but actually using them to get good answers and self-educate, maybe also beyond those formative years. Yeah.
Lifelong learning is the biggest trend in education, and we see this with our own users. You finish your university degree and then you might want to read the CFA or the GMAT book or a book on HR policies, etc. And so what's interesting is a lot of our B2B clients are buying Perlego for their employees and stuff. So that is another trend, is I think you won't just study once anymore. You'll reskill and upskill during your career, maybe 3-4 times. So that's another thing I think will change.
Amazing. Well, look, I think we're out of time. I'm
Great.
Conscious. But thank you so much for joining us.
Really great to meet you.
My pleasure.
Super exciting what you're building. And we'll be following along.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Ciao.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.